Good evening. It's Scott Rustrolz here on May 23rd for today's edition of the Listen and Learn podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Again, as a reminder, if you enjoy our videos, please subscribe to the channel so you get updated when the videos are released. Share them with your friends. Provide thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing back from everyone. There are really, today, three stories I'm going to focus on. The Trump budget, more of an update on what happened yesterday in Manchester, England, and the evil terrorist act there, and then some final thoughts on the continued story involving Russia and the Trump administration. First, though, let's focus on the Trump budget, which is really the substantive policy issue of the day. And as we mentioned yesterday, I think you have to look at this primarily as a political document rather than a government document, a governing document, because Congress is not going to enact it wholesale. There's not an appetite to do the kind of cuts that the Trump administration is pushing. And really, this is the beginning of a negotiation, as well as a way of documenting what are the priorities of the administration in terms of spending. Where does he envision the federal government being over the next 10 years, and how is he going to reposition alongside that and according to that governing vision? So we really got some insight into that today. But again, you can't expect Congress to enact all, or unfortunately, even most of this. So the budget will balance over 10 years. That assumes you get a growth rate of 3% by the end of the next decade, which I do think is quite reasonable. We've grown 3.2% over the past 50 years. Are you really going to bet against this generation of Americans being able to be as innovative and productive and creative as the past generations have been? I would argue no. I think betting against Americans and any generation of Americans has never been a winning bet, and I don't think we should start betting that way going forward. So he's going to cut non-defense discretionary spending from $600 billion to $429 billion, which is a bold, big cut. But there's a lot of things we need to do in terms of cutting fraud, rethinking whether or not the federal government should even be involved in these programs, or they're better served at state levels, and finding ways to cut programs and cut spending altogether. Unfortunately, there's no appetite for a cut of that magnitude on Capitol Hill. There are too many sacred cows. Cuts are going to have to be much more gradual than that. So you're unlikely to see the budget that Congress ends up passing balancing over 10 years. That said, I think you have to be careful about some of the hysteria you're hearing. For instance, I saw a headline today: Trump cuts $600 billion of Medicaid spending. Well, Medicaid in 2016 was $368 billion, so there's not even $600 billion to cut. What he's really doing is slowing the growth rate in Medicaid spending and other programs like Medicaid. So over the next 10 years, Medicaid will go from $368 billion to $524 billion. That's a 3.3% per annum increase. So again, you have to be careful what you read. Most of these cuts are really cuts in the rate of growth. And yes, while some programs are getting cut, most of them are not. Most of this is going to a slower rate of growth. And when you consider the exorbitant growth over the past 30 years, and frankly, uninterrupted growth since the Great Society and Lyndon B. Johnson, slowing the rate of growth is not an unreasonable thing to do. He also is making those significant cuts on agencies like the EPA, which have just grown way too big and are now over-regulating our economy and slowing growth dramatically. So he recommends cutting that 31%, which I think is spot on. Fortunately, again, that's an area where you're just not going to see an appetite for that kind of cut. Increases defense spending by $54 billion. One thing I was sad to see is increasing naval power is going to be an important thing, I think, as we think about how we want to position ourselves militarily over the next 50 years. And a key part of that is getting to a 350-ship Navy from 275 currently. There's not enough spending here to get us towards that. Now, I think this is a first cut at it, and it's solving more immediate-term problems this year. And then in future years, as we get the military back to its former level of readiness, you then think about the structural increases in terms of our capacity. But longer run, we need to think about how we expand the Navy. For instance, we need more polar icebreakers. Going over the North Pole is going to be an increasing area of trade. It's an area of significant commodities, a lot of oil up there, probably some precious metals. And thanks to our Alaska, we have a significant territory towards the North Pole. We're going to need a naval presence up there. We need to invest in polar icebreakers like the Russians have. And there's not that investment. So that was one policy area where I was a little disappointed. And I think another key thing is we start having these spending battles in the next couple months. You really probably see them pick up in summer months and then really in September. we need to get funding for the wall. That was a core campaign promise. I think Trump needs to say, I need a couple $2 billion down payment. He's built this verbal wall, as we've spoken about in the past, and we've got in defense spend, we've got in border crossings down about 70%. But we need to start building a physical wall there. So get a couple $2 billion for the wall, I think, has to be a non-negotiable issue. Other big thing getting a lot of talk on is increasing work requirements, which I think is absolutely spot on. There are 42.3 million people on food stamps today, and I want to show you this chart. There were, prior to the Obama administration taking office, there were about 25 million people on food stamps. That got up to a peak of 49 million, and now we're down to about 42 million. So we're only a couple million off the high. And you have to ask yourself, a 50% 8-year surge in food stamps, is that something that is consistent with a 4.4% unemployment rate? A, that's a sign the economy is not as strong as it seems. But B, we need to have work requirements. Where if you're an able-bodied adult and you're taking advantage of some of these programs, you need to be at least looking for work and working. This is a country that we believe if you fall down, we're going to pick you up, but we can't keep you standing forever. And a problem we have is many of our liberal friends see permanent welfare as compassion, but permanent welfare is not compassionate. Setting people up for jobs and so they get off of welfare is what's compassionate. And we should define welfare success not by how many people are on the rolls, but by how many people are getting off the rolls because they're getting jobs. That's success. How can we turn the safety net into a safety trampoline? So expanding work requirements, rethinking the way we do welfare needs to be a core priority for Congress and the Trump administration in coming years. And it's something House Freedom Caucus should demand being included in any spending bill and in any budget bill. So those are some kind of thoughts on the budget. Sorry for the length, but it's a pretty meaty topic. Next, just a more follow-up of the evil terrorist attack in Manchester with 22 dead. UK has had to move its threat level from critical to severe, suggesting that they think another attack may be imminent. And it turns out that the suicide bomber is a fellow by the name of Salman Abedi. He's the son of Libyan refugees. It's just terrible when you open your doors to people, try to bring them into your country, and then they do something like this. They've also arrested a 23-year-old in connection, and I think a big lesson from past attacks is very few lone wolves ever act truly alone, and there's at least some kind of supporting cell around them, which I think we'll probably see develop here. I was happy to hear the president describe him today as an evil loser. And that's what he is. If you go and target teenage and preteen girls, you're a pathetic piece of trash. And to call someone anything other than that is to just deny reality. We need to call these people out for what they are, and we as a society need to determine whether or not we're willing to live with this type of evil in the world, or if we're going to go once and for all and eradicate it from the face of the earth. So hopefully it looks the UK is able to stop any further attacks from coming. But this is one of the problems in all of Europe, where you have 1 million people who entered your countries past couple of years. You have no idea who they are. Once you're in Europe, you can easily travel to any other country, which just makes it very hard for the security services. So this continue to hope that the security services, and UK's are quite good, are able to head off anything else from happening. And finally, just want to talk briefly about this Trump story, Russia story. And I think the key thing to watch here is as the media continues its endless effort to try and undermine the president, is you notice they've stopped talking entirely about collusion with Russia, and now all they're talking about is obstruction of justice. And what this is a tacit admission that there was no collusion. So they're trying to move the 8-ball to another topic. And that's a sign that they really have nothing here. So, that didn't work. Let's throw this obstruction of justice thing up against the wall. And when there's going to turn out to be no obstruction of justice, they're going to find something else to point their fingers at. But, I think the fact that they've completely moved on from the collusion to this other new shiny object is the fact like James Clapper has said, John Brennan has said, Chuck Grassley has said, Dianne Feinstein has said, is there's no evidence of collusion. And the media needs to stop just going on what every anonymous source says and report the facts. And the facts are that there's thus far not been any evidence of any improper collusion, but you wouldn't get that from watching CNN and MSNBC. And that's why we hope you're listening to us for some real news. Thank you again, though, for listening all the way to the end of the video today. Have a great day, everyone. And again, if you enjoyed the video, please share it and subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. Have a great night.